The dinner rush at Table 9 Biestra was like a tidal wave crashing through the kitchen. The air pulsed with the sizzle of hot oil, the rhythmic clatter of knives and cutting boards, and the rapid shuffle of servers trying to keep pace. It was chaos, but the kind of chaos restaurants lived and breathed. Then came the loud, jarring clang of metal against steel. Chef Martinez slammed his spatula onto the stainless steel counter, his face flushed with rage. "Where's the salmon for table 12? He barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. "And what happened to the vegetarian pasta? This is the third time this week." Camila Rivera froze in place. Her pulse thundered in her ears, and her fingers clutched the edges of her worn-out order pad. She knew, absolutely knew. She had entered those orders. Salmon with lemon butter sauce, medium rare. Extra seasonal vegetables on the side. Pasta primavera, no cheese, extra garlic. Everything had been written down, exactly as the couple had requested. She could still see them clearly. Table 12. The woman in the blue dress, who smiled warmly when Camila suggested the house-made wine. Her husband, who had joked about finally finding a place that actually knew how to cook fish right. "I took that order, chef," Camila said, her voice steady, though her insides twisted. "I entered it into the system 20 minutes ago." Then Gordon Marsh appeared like a brewing storm, his thick brows knitted together in a scowl Camila had grown all too familiar with over the past 2 weeks. At 35, Gordon had the swagger of a man who claimed to have climbed every rung in the restaurant business, but whispers among the staff told a different story, that his rise had more to do with charm and connections than actual competence. "This is getting ridiculous, Camila," Gordon declared loudly, ensuring the entire kitchen could hear. "That's the 4th order this week that's gone missing after you supposedly entered it." His tone was cold, laced with sarcasm. "Maybe it's time you stopped chit-chatting with guests and focused on doing your job." The comment hit like a slap. Camila had worked at Table 9 Bistro for 3 years and had never once received a complaint. She prided herself on her attention to detail, her uncanny memory for orders and faces, and her ability to make every guest feel seen and valued. Her section was always spotless. Her turnaround time was among the fastest. Her tips, consistently the highest on the floor. "I really don't understand what's happening," she said, her voice quieter now, tight with confusion. Around her, other servers began to slow their pace, their gazes drifting toward the scene. They weren't curious, they were concerned. "Well, the order isn't in the system," Gordon replied coldly, pulling out his phone and holding it up. "Look, nothing for table 12, no pasta order either. This is costing us money, Camila, and disappointed guests don't come back." From the edge of the kitchen, 22-year-old Eli Marsh, Hood's nephew, looked up from where he was polishing wine glasses. His young face showed concern, but to Camila, something felt off. His eyes were too bright, too invested in the unfolding tension. "Maybe it's a system glitch," Eli offered gently, as if trying to be helpful. "It's happened to me a couple of times too, but I always double-check everything." Gordon's face softened instantly as he looked at his nephew. The change in demeanor was unmistakable. "That's exactly the kind of attitude we need here, Eli," he said with a nod of approval before swinging his gaze back to Camila, his eyes iced over again. "Maybe you should learn from someone who actually pays attention." The words cut deeper than Camila expected. Eli, brand new, barely 3 weeks on the floor, was being hailed as a model employee. He'd been hired with no prior serving experience, bypassed the weeks of training Camila once endured, and had been given the best tables in the house within days, those coveted seats by the window where high spenders sat and tipped big. Oddly, Eli's section never had issues. Across the kitchen, Maria Santos, one of the senior servers, caught Camila's eye. A subtle shake of her head and a small, empathetic frown said everything. "This isn't right, but we can't do anything. I'll comp the meal and get new orders out," Camilla said, already reaching for her wallet. "And I'll pay for the ingredients if I have to." "It's not about the damn money," Gordon snapped. "It's about this happening over and over. Reputation is everything in this business. One bad review can wipe out months of hard work." As if on cue, the hostess stepped into the kitchen, her face pale. "Gordon, the couple at table 12 wants to speak with the manager. They're not happy." Gordon adjusted his tie and shot Camilla a look that could have chilled a bottle of red wine. "Fix this and check your system, Camilla, because if this happens again, we're going to have a very serious conversation about your future here." The world seemed to narrow as Camilla stood in the center of the kitchen. All eyes turned to her. Some sympathetic, others calculating if being associated with her might cost them. The warmth of the kitchen, once her second home, now felt cold and hostile. Eli reappeared beside her, his tone soft, almost comforting. "Hey, don't let it get to you too much," he said. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're stressed. Maybe just slow down a bit. Double-check everything." It should have sounded kind, supportive, but something about it felt rehearsed, like a line in a play, too perfect, too smooth. Camilla studied his face. Something didn't sit right, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. "Thanks," she replied quietly, turning back to her order pad, steeling herself for the uncomfortable conversation waiting at table 12. But as she stepped out of the kitchen, Camilla couldn't shake a chilling thought. Something is very wrong at table 9, Bistro. The mistakes were too consistent, too perfectly timed, and always seemed to land at her tables. Still, she knew better than to make accusations without proof. That would only make her look desperate or paranoid. What she didn't know was that someone else had been watching, silently, taking notes, and beginning to suspect that what was happening in that restaurant ran far deeper than simple server error. 3 days later, the morning staff meeting felt less like a discussion and more like a trial, with no defense attorney in sight. Camilla sat in the far corner of the empty dining room, which was usually filled with laughter and clinking glasses, but today felt cold and unfamiliar. At the front stood Gordon, posture straight, voice commanding like a general rallying troops before a battle. "We've had 7 order issues this week," he declared, his gaze sweeping the room before locking directly on Camilla. 7. That's more than the last 3 months combined. When Gordon said corporate, the room seemed to collectively flinch. Everyone knew Table 9 Bistro was part of a larger chain whose owner had never shown his face. Communication came only through financial reports and quarterly performance reviews. If corporate started asking questions, firings usually followed, fast and without ceremony. "That's why I'm implementing changes effective today," Gordon continued. "Anyone responsible for repeated service mistakes will be reassigned to a lower traffic section until they prove they're ready for more responsibility." Camilla felt her cheeks burn. He didn't have to say her name. Everyone knew who he meant. The back section, just off the kitchen, was the purgatory of the restaurant world. Fewer tables, smaller tips. It was where newbies earned their stripes or veterans faded into obscurity. "That's not fair," Maria whispered, just loud enough to be heard. "Camilla's been here longer than any of us. She knows this place inside and out." "Fairness isn't the issue," Derek cut in, a server who had long been eyeing Camilla's prime section. "If customers aren't happy, we all suffer." Camilla bit her lip. His words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Reputation was everything. But it wasn't about one mistake anymore. She could feel it. This wasn't about service. This was personal. "Maybe we could implement a buddy system," Eli chimed in, raising his hand eagerly. Have experienced servers double-check orders for anyone struggling. I'd be happy to help." Gordon lit up like a proud parent. "Excellent idea. Eli, starting today, you'll be taking over the West section. You've been doing a great job, and that section deserves consistent service." Camilla's heart sank. The West section ate garden-facing tables that drew in business lunches and romantic dinners. The highest-spending, most generous customers had once been her domain. Now, it was handed over to someone who'd barely worked there 3 weeks. As the meeting broke up, Camilla felt the air shift around her. Co-workers avoided eye contact. After-work drink invites dried up. Even Maria, her only real ally, kept her distance during peak hours. "People think bad luck's contagious," Jules, the longtime bartender, said one quiet afternoon as he wiped down glasses. At 52, he'd seen it all in this industry. Rises, falls, betrayals, dressed in uniforms. "You think I'm cursed?" Camilla tried to joke, but the humor didn't land. "Not you," Jules muttered, glancing around the dining room. "But something sure smells bad around here. And it ain't the salmon." His voice dropped lower. "You ever notice? All this crap started right around the time that kid Eli showed up. Coincidence?" "You can't blame him for my mistakes," Camilla said, but the words tasted hollow, even to her. "Can't I?" Jules leaned closer, setting his glass down. "I've been watching. He's too smooth. Always volunteers to help. Always nearby when things go wrong. And somehow, not one mistake in 3 weeks. That doesn't happen, not when you're new and still asking which wines pair with duck." Jules' observation clicked in Camilla's brain like a puzzle piece sliding into place. She'd been so focused on her own sense of failure that she hadn't noticed the pattern right in front of her. Eli's perfection wasn't just unlikely, it was unnatural. "What are you saying?" she asked softly, her fingers tightening around her order pad. "I'm saying," Jules replied, his voice low but firm, "you might want to pay closer attention to who's always around when things go wrong, and ask yourself why the guy trying to fire you has a nephew who never seems to screw up the way you supposedly do." That night, as Camilla wiped down her new section, a shadowy row of forgotten tables near the kitchen, her mind raced. That lunch shift had been humiliating. 4 regular customers had asked where she'd gone, why their favorite server was suddenly banished to the restaurant's equivalent of Siberia. But humiliation didn't compare to the slow-burning suspicion taking root in her gut. Someone was sabotaging her. The question wasn't if anymore. It was who and why. Her eyes wandered to Eli, smiling confidently as he charmed a table of executives in what used to be her section. That's when she saw it, how he lingered by the computer terminal, always nearby, always available to help, always right where a little well-timed interference could cause a disaster. One that Camilla would be blamed for. She should have been angry, but what she felt now was sharper than anger. It was resolve. If someone was toying with her livelihood, with the years she had poured into this place, she would find out who, and she would find out why. What Camilla didn't know was that someone else had already started asking those same questions, and that someone was about to blow the entire story wide open. Ray Martinez didn't stand out in the kitchen. Faded jeans, worn-out t-shirt, quiet demeanor. He looked like any other dishwasher, trying to keep his head down and avoid drama. At 43, he moved with the practiced rhythm of someone who had done this before, though he claimed it was his first time working in a restaurant. "The new guy's solid," Chef Martinez remarked to Gordon during prep. "Doesn't complain, keeps pace, even organized the dish pit better than the last 3 combined." Gordon barely looked up. "As long as he stays out of the way, I don't care what he does." But what Gordon didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ray Martinez was actually Dominic West, the owner of the entire restaurant chain that included Table 9 Bistro. That summer, Gorban went on to head the Table 9. For the past 6 months, Dominic had been traveling through South America, trying to decide whether to expand or sell the business. He'd left daily operations in the hands of trusted managers, believing everything would run smoothly, until the reports started piling up. Declining profits, slipping customer reviews, soaring staff turnover. But what stood out most were repeated complaints about one employee, Camila Rivera, labeled a problem in multiple reports, flagged for behavioral concerns, and noted as needing corrective action. It didn't add up. Camila's sections consistently generated more revenue than others. Her name showed up in positive guest comment cards week after week. If she was a problem, why was she also the most productive? Dominic didn't trust spreadsheets anymore, so he returned undercover. As Ray, he had the perfect vantage point from the dish station. He could see the kitchen dynamics, the pass-through window, and most importantly, the staff. Camila was nothing like the reports. She was meticulous, warm, and deeply professional, the kind of employee any restaurant owner would dream of. But Eli was different. Under his charming exterior, Dominic saw troubling signs. The young man botched wine orders, overlooked dietary restrictions, and asked rookie questions that didn't fit someone with great potential. And then there were his habits, hovering near the terminal, helping with complex orders, always appearing right before something went wrong. The turning point came on a Thursday evening. Dominic was scrubbing pots when he saw Eli slip into the break room just after Camila had left. Something told him to follow. Quietly, he wiped his hands and strolled past the door, left slightly ajar. Through the crack, he saw Eli rifling through Camila's coat pocket, pulling out her order pad, snapping photos of several pages and putting it back exactly as it was. The whole thing took less than 2 minutes. Dominic stood frozen for a moment, the implications washing over him. If Eli had copies of Camila's notes, he could easily target specific orders, alter them, delete them, make her look incompetent. A perfect setup, and a perfect scapegoat. "Everything okay, Ray?" Jules asked, dropping off a tray of dirty glassware. "Just thinking," Dominic replied, his voice calm, but his mind was racing. "This place has some interesting dynamics." Jules let out a dry laugh. "You're not wrong. You know what's really interesting? Every single problem started after Eli got hired. But around here, point that out, and you're out the door." "What if someone had proof?" Dominic asked carefully, testing the waters. "Proof?" Jules raised an eyebrow. "Everyone knows Gordon protects his nephew, but knowing it and proving it? Whole different story. Camila's being set up, and the kid causing the mess is getting rewarded for it." Dominic nodded slowly. "Sounds like someone should do something about that." Jules sighed. "Yeah, someone should, but no one will. The owner's never around, and corporate, they don't care about anything but the bottom line." Dominic smiled faintly. If only Jules knew. The owner had been there all along, watching from behind a stack of dirty dishes and ready to blow the lid off everything. Jules turned away. Ray allowed himself a cold smile. If Jules only knew the dishwasher had been the owner all along, scrubbing pans for over a week now, quietly watching every move. Dominic knew it was time to act, but he also knew emotion wasn't evidence. Accusations without hard proof would be dismissed as nothing more than the bitter complaints of a disgruntled employee. What Dominic had was a unique advantage. No one suspected the man behind the dishes was also the one who signed every paycheck. He didn't need authority right now. He needed a camera. In the right place at the right moment. Friday night was the perfect time. While the restaurant buzzed with the chaotic rhythm of a busy weekend dinner rush, Dominic stepped into the alley behind the building and made a phone call to the only person who knew his true identity. "It's me," Dominic said quietly, keeping an eye on the back door. "I need you to make a reservation under the name Williams. Make it sound important. Anniversary dinner, big spender, and request table 9 specifically." "Table 9, Marcus replied. "Is there a reason?" Dominic glanced through the small window into the restaurant, his gaze locking onto a familiar figure. "That's Camila's section." And if his theory was right, he thought, eyes narrowing, tonight that table will become ground zero. 2 hours later, the trap was ready. During his short break, Dominic had installed a tiny wireless camera behind a potted plant near the order terminal, a flawless vantage point to capture every interaction. The device was smaller than a shirt button and completely unnoticeable unless someone knew exactly where to look. Marcus Williams, Dominic's longtime business partner and the only one in on the plan, had called in to confirm an 8 p.m. reservation. He requested an elegant anniversary celebration, generous budget, top-tier wine selections, and an expectation of exceptional service, the kind of customer Gordon wouldn't dare assign to a rookie. "Camilla, you've got VIP duty tonight at table 9, Gordon announced during the pre-shift briefing, his voice smooth, casual, too casual. "Mr. Williams is celebrating his wedding anniversary and already asked about premium wine pairings. Don't screw this up." The words were dressed as responsibility, but the undertone was clear. This was a setup, disguised as a chance. Camila simply nodded. A week in the penalty section had done damage. Her rent was coming up, and her tips had barely covered groceries. A big anniversary dinner could close the gap. Still, she knew better than to believe this was kindness. "Actually," Eli cut in with a gentle tone, "table 9 can be tricky with the lighting, especially for wine pours. I've worked that section all week. Might make sense if I handle it." "No," Gordon said too quickly. His tone was sharp, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. "Camilla needs to show she's ready for main floor duties again. This is her opportunity." The trap was blatantly obvious, and Dominic almost felt sorry for her. Gordon wasn't giving Camila a chance. He was staging a public failure. But what Gordon didn't know was that the guest of honor was in on it. And every move was now being recorded in HD. At 8:15, Marcus arrived, seated at table 9 with the reverence reserved for visiting royalty. He played the role flawlessly, scrutinizing the menu, asking detailed questions about preparation, wine pairings, pacing. Everything about his manners said, "I expect perfection." Camila rose to the occasion with grace. She explained the wine list with warmth, recommended pairings with confidence, and answered every question with knowledge and poise. Her demeanor wasn't just professional, it was what had once made her the restaurant's brightest star. Marcus placed a complex, yet reasonable order. Duck confit with seasonal vegetables, a wine Camila recommended, and a custom dessert for the anniversary. She wrote everything down carefully, confirming each detail with Marcus before heading to the terminal. This was the moment Dominic had waited for. From the dish station, he watched the camera feed as Camila approached the screen. Her fingers moved with precise familiarity, confirming duck temperature, wine label, dessert note. Every step was accurate. Then she left the terminal to check on another table. Less than 2 minutes later, Eli slid up to the screen. He looked casual, relaxed, just another server entering a routine order, but the camera captured the truth. With swift, deliberate movements, he opened the order for table 9, changed duck to chicken, swapped in a cheaper wine, deleted the dessert note, closed the ticket, then strolled away, chatting with a coworker like nothing had happened. 25 minutes later, the kitchen served the wrong dish with the wrong wine. Marcus performed his part with subtle brilliance, expressing disappointed confusion. "This isn't the duck we discussed," he said gently. "My wife was looking forward to it all day." Gordon arrived quickly, his irritation visible even before Marcus had explained the issue. Camila stood beside the table, order pad in hand, clearly puzzled by the mistake. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," Gordon said, his voice coated with false politeness. "Looks like there was a mix-up in the system. We'll get the correct meal out right away, and of course everything will be complimentary." "I entered the duck," Camila said quietly, flipping through her notes. "I even double-checked the wine pairing." "Well, the system shows chicken," Gordon cut in coldly. "And the wrong wine. This kind of sloppiness is exactly what we've been warning about." Across the floor, Eli watched the scene unfold, face neutral, hands folded. To most, he looked like a coworker trying to stay out of the drama. But the camera caught what no one else did, a flash of a smile. Brief, satisfied, cruel. The smile of someone whose plan had landed perfectly. What Eli didn't know was that his moment of triumph had been captured on film. And the trap at table 9 had just sprung shut. Saturday morning, the restaurant pulsed with nervous energy. An emergency staff meeting had been called, something that had never happened before. Everyone was there, servers, line cooks, bartenders, even Ray, the dishwasher. Gordon stood at the front of the dining room like usual, but something was off. He kept glancing at his phone, eyes flicking toward the kitchen, like he was waiting for something, or someone, to appear. "I called this meeting," he began, voice thinner than normal, "because we need to address the recent service issues. Corporate is asking questions. We need to get ahead of this before it becomes a problem." Camila sat silently in the back, the weight of accusation heavy in her chest. She hadn't slept. Her mind had looped through the events of last night, trying to understand how a flawless order had unraveled into disaster. "Before you start," came a calm voice from the kitchen doorway, "I think everyone should see something." All heads turned. Ray stepped into the room carrying a laptop. But this wasn't the quiet dishwasher people were used to. He walked with purpose, with presence. "What are you doing?" Gordon snapped. "This is a staff meeting, not your—" "My name isn't Ray," the man said, cutting him off. He set the laptop on a nearby table. "My name is Dominic West, and I own this restaurant." The silence was deafening. Even the hum of the HVAC system seemed to fade. Faces froze in a mix of disbelief and dawning realization. Jules was the first to react, his seasoned eyes lighting up. A slow smile crept across his face as pieces began to click into place. "That's impossible," Gordon muttered. "The owner's in South America. I have his emails." "You mean the ones you've been sending yourself for weeks?" Dominic asked evenly. "The reports about problem employees that conveniently never match financial data?" Eli, seated near the front, sank into his chair. The charming glow was gone. His skin had gone pale. His hands trembled. "I came back early because the numbers didn't add up," Dominic continued, opening the laptop. "Guest reviews were down, but revenue was up. Staff morale, supposedly terrible, yet turnover was concentrated in management, and one server, Camila, was blamed for every problem while consistently earning the highest tips." He turned the screen. The first video began to play. Eli, alone in the break room, rummaging through Camilla's coat, snapping photos of her notes. Gasps rippled through the room. Everyone recognized the room, and they recognized what they were seeing. "This was from last Thursday," Dominic explained. "But it wasn't the only time. I've 3 clips just like it." The next video rolled. Clear as day, Ellie calmly changed the duck order to chicken, swapped the wine, deleted the dessert. All with a disturbingly casual expression. "The guest at table 9 was my partner," Dominic said. "Last night was a test, and the person who set up Camilla walked right into their own trap." A voice cut through the silence. Firm, furious. It was Maria Santos. How could you do that to her? She demanded, her voice shaking with restrained anger. Camilla never did anything to you. Yeli finally looked up. Tears streamed down his young face and his voice broke. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Uncle Gordon said she was getting too much attention from customers, that she made the rest of us look bad. He said if she had a few issues, she'd be easier to manage. Liar, Gordon snapped, but the confidence in his voice was gone. There's more, Dominic interrupted, switching to another video file. This time, the screen showed Gordon and Eli in the office after hours. Gordon pointed at a floor plan, specifically Camilla's section, while Eli nodded eagerly. I don't know exactly what they're discussing, Dominic said calmly, but what I do know is that Gordon never once mentioned his nephew's involvement in any of the reports he sent me. Instead, all of them targeted one person, Camilla. Jules, the seasoned bartender, stood slowly. His voice was low, clear, and weighted with years of experience. Let me get this straight, he said. The kid sabotages the orders, the uncle covers for him and blames someone else. Meanwhile, the two of them get praised, and the innocent one gets demoted and nearly fired? That's exactly right, Dominic confirmed. And it probably would have continued if a few people in this room hadn't asked the right questions. Jules, your comments about the timing of these incidents were invaluable. Jules nodded, his expression grim. 40 years in this business, you learn to smell when something's rotten. Camilla had barely moved since the videos began. She sat frozen, eyes fixed on the screen. A wave of relief surged through her, but it was laced with fury. She had come within inches of losing everything over a web of lies. This doesn't end here, Dominic declared, his voice echoing like a gavel. There will be consequences. Immediate ones. No one breathed. Dominic shut the laptop, the sound cutting through the silence like a blade. Gordon Marsh, he said, each word sharp as steel. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building after you surrender your keys and access cards. Your final paycheck will be sent as required by law. Gordon's expression flickered from shock to anger to desperation. You can't do this. I've been loyal to this place for 3 years. I helped build this restaurant's reputation. One mistake. Calm mistake. Dominic's voice sliced through the room like ice. You destroyed a good employee's reputation to protect your nephew's sabotage. You filed false reports. You created a toxic workplace. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate fraud. Eli sat crumpled, his face buried in his hands. The charming young man who once worked the floor with a winning smile now looked like a boy who had just seen his future collapse. Really? You're also terminated, Dominic continued, his voice quieter but no less firm. And your case is more serious. Altering business records is a felony in this state. I'll be filing a report this afternoon. Please, Ellie sobbed, eyes bloodshot. I'll pay everything back. I'll work for free. I just can't have a criminal record. I'm supposed to start college this fall. Maria Santos stood, her voice shaking with restrained fury. You should have thought about that before you tried to ruin someone's career. Camilla has bills to pay too. She has a life too. But that didn't stop you from throwing her under the bus. Camilla's eyes welled up. For weeks, she had carried the weight of doubt, guilt, and isolation. Now, surrounded by coworkers standing up for her, the cracks in her heart began to mend. Not just with vindication, but with the realization that she still belonged. What happens now? Asked Derek, the server who had once eyed Camilla's section. His voice was different now, lower, more respectful. Dominic turned to address the entire room. Now, we rebuild, he said. We create a culture based on fairness, transparency, and mutual respect, and we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. He walked over to Camilla, who still sat stunned, as if she couldn't believe any of this was real. Camilla Rivera, he said gently. I owe you an apology. You've been through hell because I failed to oversee this location properly. I'd like to offer you the position of floor supervisor, effective immediately, with a significant raise and a performance bonus for what you've endured. She was speechless. The position she had only dreamed of, now offered to her freely as a sign of trust and recognition. Thank you, yes, I accept, she whispered, eyes shining. Good, Dominic nodded. Your first task, help me interview candidates for the new assistant manager role. I want someone who understands that the success of this place starts with respecting the people who make it run. From the back of the room, Jules raised his hand. If you're looking for someone, he said, I'd like to nominate myself. A ripple of warm laughter passed through the staff, the first real laughter all morning. Perfect, Dominic smiled. You've got the experience and the eye. Let's talk after the meeting. As security arrived and escorted Gordon out, Dominic turned to face the remaining staff. I'm implementing a few changes immediately, he said. First, we'll be launching an anonymous feedback system. If you have a problem, you can report it without fear of retaliation. Second, we're instituting a strict anti-nepotism policy. Family can work here, but no special treatment. Third, every quarter, I'll spend a week working a different role, just to stay connected to the daily flow. The room buzzed, not with tension, but with a quiet, rising hope. And most importantly, Dominic concluded, you all need to understand something. This restaurant's success doesn't come from the food or the branding. It comes from you, the people who make our guests feel seen, cared for, and welcome. When someone undermines that, they're not just hurting one person. They're threatening the entire foundation we've built together. 3 months later, Table 9 Bistro wasn't just back on its feet. It had become one of the city's most admired workplaces in the culinary world. Camilla thrived in her new role. She designed training programs that helped new servers succeed without lowering standards. Jules, now assistant manager, implemented systems that ensured transparency and blocked manipulation before it could begin. The anonymous feedback program surfaced and resolved small issues before they became big ones. Staff turnover dropped to nearly zero. Guest satisfaction soared. Eli never did go to college that fall. His charges resulted in community service and probation, but the greater consequence was learning that mistakes don't just impact the person who makes them. Gordon found work at a local chain restaurant. His departure from Table 9 Bistro, carefully omitted from his record. As for Dominique, he kept his promise. Every quarter, he returned, no longer disguised as a dishwasher but always present, always listening. And on busy Friday nights, when laughter filled the air and glasses clinked beneath soft lights, Camilla would sometimes catch Dominic's eye from across the floor. They'd share a small, knowing smile, a nod that needed no words, because they both understood something most people never do. Justice doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it comes from the person who washes dishes, who cares enough to see, to listen, and to act. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where every story is a reminder that truth may whisper, but when it speaks, it changes everything.